What's up, everyone? Welcome to another edition of the show. I'm your host, Daniel Cody, and this is where I give commentary and reviews on all things wrestling. And before I get started, I want to thank you guys for, in my previous video of Friday Night SmackDown review, the video got 3 likes. Thank you guys for that. I really appreciate that. Also, be sure to watch the review on Survivor Series 2004 review from the past. I think that one's going to be interesting as well. But today, right before the event of tonight, we're going to talk about another Survivor Series event that happened on a Sunday on this very date of November the 21st, 2010. And the show opened up with Daniel Bryan, or should I say Bryan Danielson, versus Ted Dibiase Jr. Background story is that Ted Dibiase Jr. was offered to have the $1 million championship passed down to him from his father, Ted Dibiase Sr. And of course, Ted Jr. refused and went for the U.S. title, which was currently held by Daniel Bryan, or should I say Bryan Danielson. But the match started off interesting, and Ted DiBiase, who was accompanied by Maurice, who is now with the Miz. Ted Jr. controlled the match, but Daniel Bryan got some momentum before hurting his elbow with a running dive through the middle rope onto Ted DiBiase on the outside. We saw some yes kicks before they were entitled the yes kicks. And of course, we saw a superplex before the yes lock or crossface was locked in for the victory. Meaning that Daniel Bryan retained the championship and eventually would be attacked from behind by Money in the Bank winner at the time, The Miz, who would then go on to have Maurice. Speaking of today, where are the two today? I heard that Ted DiBiase Sr. Ted DiBiase Jr., like his father, went into ministry, and Bryan Danielson has recently turned heel in AEW as a contender for the AEW Heavyweight Championship, now held by Hangman Adam Page. And now it's time for some cowboy subjects, because I'm PG. So, moving forward, we have Sheamus versus John Morrison. Let me first point out that there was a funny sign in the crowd that said Sheamus couldn't get a tan even in Miami, because Survivor Series 2010 was in Miami as it was in 07. But that night it was Sheamus versus Morrison. Sheamus started off the match with a slap to Morrison, and the fight got started with Morrison doing a running corkscrew onto Sheamus. And despite Sheamus taking control of most of the match, John Morrison would fight back with 2 swinging heel kicks for the victory against Sheamus, who at the time was WWE's King of the Ring. Speaking of Sheamus and Johnny Drip Drip, it just makes me extra upset to know that John Morrison is released. Over the past couple of weeks, we've been seeing John Morrison getting in touch with subliminal YouTube-like meditations, just sitting around meditating, and then just totally release. Help me understand. Somebody's got to help me understand this. How is it that we are having budget problems when WWE is selling out arenas every week? How is that happening? And I'm not asking that out of a rhetorical sarcasm. I just really want to know what's going on, because we're losing way too many stars. And the more stars we lose, the chances are all the other companies, including AEW, are going to keep kicking WWE's butt. But I digress. Moving on, in a short, brief content, we saw Dolph Ziggler defend his Intercontinental Championship against Caval, who was also known in TNA as Loki for the most part. So, now let's get to the tradition. Team Mysterio featuring Rey Mysterio, MVP, Kofi Kingston, Chris Masters, and The Big Show would face off against Del Rio, Cody Rhodes, Jack Hager, at the time known as Jack Swagger, Rex, and the future star Drew McIntyre. Also, let's get this thing started with MVP. Starting off the match, Miami Zone. He would start the match off with Drew McIntyre, the future of WWE, who would carry us during the pandemic along with Roman Reigns. But the match would start off with MVP and Drew, and MVP would be seen giving his bowling elbow, which is kind of shades of another Miami star, The Rock, whom, what if The Rock decides to show up tonight? I can't get my hopes up too much, but anything can happen. But MVP delivers the elbow, but it didn't keep Drew down. Drew would eliminate MVP with a little bit of an assist from Alberto Del Rio. The MVP chance would continue because they're in Miami. Del Rio would tap out Chris Masters. Big Show would come in and knock out Del Rio and Cody Rhodes, and then get bulldozed by Rex. What happened to Rex? Someone let me know in the comments. Kofi rolled up Rex, speaking of which, and Jack Hager, then known as Jack Swagger, would force Kofi to tap out with Lock. And of course, we have the 619 and the leap off the Big Show to eliminate Jack Swagger. And 619 with a sharpshooter show-stopping choke slam would pin Drew McIntyre, making Rey Mysterio and the biggest little man and the Big Show sole survivors. Moving on to the next match, we have Laycool, Michelle McCool, Mrs. Undertaker, and Layla versus Natalya in a handicap match. This handicap match was for the Divas Championship at the time, and it was a handicap match that was a bit short. And first off, I did not know Layla was a Miami Heat cheerleader, but nonetheless, it was a handicap match in which Natalya gave Michelle McCool the sharpshooter, and McCool tapped out, and Laycool, being sore losers, ambushed Natalya after she celebrated emotionally winning her Divas Championship. But thankfully, the story doesn't end there, as Beth Phoenix would return to help her good friend Natalya fend off Laycool. And of course, yes, again, Natalya is the Divas Champion, but there was kind of a funny angle Laycool was, because both women had a replica of the Divas Championship. Which one was real? Now we get down to SmackDown's World Heavyweight Championship match between Edge and Kane. Kane had just came off of a rivalry with his brother, The Undertaker, burying his brother alive at Bragging Rights 2010 with help of the new coming group Nexus. And so when the rivalry started with Edge and Kane, Kane was the World Heavyweight Champion. And Edge would play some of the funniest head games with Kane kidnapping his father on script, Paul Barrett, God rest his soul. And so the match was based on mind games, but it was also for the World Championship, which Kane had. And of course, it started off with Kane being slapped, and we heard some Undertaker chants in the background. And during the match, when Kane took control, he would beat up Edge and ask him, "Where is he?" I felt like I was watching The Dark Knight because when Kane was beating up Edge, he was interrogating him like Batman would on some of the Dark Knights. Or who could ever forget Batman on The Dark Knight Rises and Bane? Where's the trigger? That's the type of vibes I felt when I was watching Kane versus Edge. Edge was beating and interrogating. Kane was beating and interrogating Edge like Batman beat up and interrogated Bane about the trigger. So, who's better at interrogating people? Kane or Batman? Who's a better interrogator? Who would scare you the most? But let's get down to the match. It was a momentum shift with some drop kicks and flying clotheslines and executions for a 2 count. And then we will also see Kane go for a choke slam with a 2 count. That didn't keep Edge down. And the Edge would eventually deliver a spear, but because both shoulders were down, the ref counted them both out, which resulted in a draw. It didn't end there as Kane would be thrown into Paul Bearer's wheelchair and pushed through the barricade, and Matt Stryker pointed out that maybe Edge is deranged this time. I guess we can say that Seth Rollins is not the only person that can send Edge to a dark place. But let's get down to a tag team match between Nexus members Gabriel and Heath versus Vladimir Kozlov and Santino Marella. This match is what you would call at the time, what some might call at the time, a restroom break quality match. It was very short, but it would be well appreciated later, considering that the Nexus had Heath and, of course, Gabriel as the tag champions, but they were accompanied by David Otunga, Curtis Axel, and the future man known as Bray Wyatt, aka The Fiend. Let me in. But at the time, he was known as Husky Harris. Development, I guess. But either way, it was a very short match that saw Heath Slater. He's got kids and he is aligned with Rhino on Impact Wrestling. He gave his own version of the zigzag to Santino Marella for the 1-2-3, and Wyatt, at the time known as Husky Harris, would ambush Vladimir Kozlov. And so the anonymous general manager, who would later be found out to be Hornswoggle, ordered the Nexus out of the arena and to go backstage, as there would be no interferences in this upcoming match right here. A very interesting match coming up between Randy Orton, WWE Champion, defending against Wade Barrett before he was Bad News Barrett and before partnering with Beth Phoenix on NXT commentation. So, let's get to the match. Randy Orton versus Wade Barrett for the WWE Championship main eventing Survivor Series that year was also a match where John Cena was the referee, the special guest referee. And background story made short, at Hell in a Cell pay-per-view, Wade Barrett, thanks to The Fiend, at the time known as Husky Harris, interfered in the match and John Cena was defeated, meaning he would be forced to join Nexus. And with the Randy Orton situation, everybody was telling Cena, do the right thing. Do not do a crooked move as the referee to protect your job. Because Randy says, even though your job is on the line, you still got to do the right thing. Because if not, you would have disrespected everyone who has been WWE champion, including yourself. And that list of people that John Cena would have disrespected would have been a long list of legends, including future rival The Rock, Randy Orton himself, The Rock, Stone Cold Steve Austin, Bret Hart, Shawn Michaels, one of my all-time favorites, The Undertaker, etc. All great WWE champions. Who could forget Hulk Hogan? All these men, Randy Savage, who have been WWE champion. And if John Cena did any crooked move to help Wade Barrett win, he would keep his job but lose respect. So John Cena had a lot of stress on his mind. But let's get into the match now that we have the background story. This match also reminded me of Stone Cold Steve Austin, special guest refereeing the match between the Brothers of Destruction at Judgment Day 98, where Stone Cold had to call a match in a certain way or he would be fired. It's kind of like that with John Cena that night. It was the filling out process with Cena chants in the background because he was the wild card. Whoever thought Cena would be chanted, and knowing that for years he was 50-50 guy. Some fans liked him, some fans didn't. Everyone loved him when he came back to face Roman Reigns. But moving forward, Barrett took control and would, you know, fight back. And after some tensity rose up between the referee after the 2 count, Barrett would go for a DDT and a wasteland for a 2 count. As Barrett took control of the match, he would get some 2 counts and then would argue with John Cena and shove John Cena. After shoving John Cena, if you pay attention, you can see Cena getting angry, but you can also see the camera shaking just to help it look much more entertaining. So whoever made the camera shake like the camera itself was angry, thank you so much for that. You deserve an extra raise and an extra payday. So Cena finally shoved Barrett. And fun fact, that Monday, 6 nights ago, prior to that night, Cena had given an AA to both Barrett and Randy Orton. But he gave it to Randy first and then Barrett. But he would shove Barrett that night out of anger, and Randy Orton would go for his RKO 1, 2, 3. Matt Striker was like, Cena's free! He got carried away, and then it dawned on Cena that because Barrett lost, Cena, would be fired. And so, despite all of this, Cena also made a promise that after the match, he was going to kick Wade Barrett's butt. So the Nexus came out to rescue Barrett, and Cena and Orton fought him off. Whoever thought that we would see Orton and Cena aligned in agreement? Never thought we'd see that at the time, but we did. Randy Orton and John Cena showed neutral respect for each other. Randy Orton retained the championship and Cena gave his farewell. What WWE played this video and posted it recently gearing up for Survivor Series. What you did not see on that video was that John Cena would shake hands all around the bottom part of the arena. He would go all around the arena, not the balcony and stuff, but he would stay on the main ground, main level of the arena and shake hands with everyone and just greet everyone, hug everyone, and then he was on his way. That's the part you did not see. But even though they said John Cena was fired, John Cena would not stay down quietly. And let's just say he didn't pull out the C Nation flag out of a gun like Stone Cold did the Bang 316, although I would have loved to see it. But it was a PG era, and a lot of children were getting into wrestling at the time, 10 years back. So we couldn't have the C Nation never give up flag on the gun. Bling! But John Cena would find a way to annoy Barrett into getting his job back, which would lead to TLC 2010. I might be able to give a review on that, but I can't make any promises. But for now, that's all I have for Survivor Series 2010. What did you think about this event? Let me know in the comment section below. That's all the time I got for you today, and I'll be back if not tonight, tomorrow, with Survivor Series 2021 results and review. Peace out, folks.